Hey kids, howdy and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams. I'm Dr. Michael Lennox. I'm here with Zoe. It's August 4th, so we're fully in the month of August. July is behind us.
Hell yeah. Does that mean we are moving into different vibes since we're in August?
Slightly. You know, when I
Okay.
described the year of 2025, I was calling this like the hot summer, right? So
Right,
it started in July and it continues in August. But it's after the sort of shit show of last month and with Mercury retrograde and Uranus changing signs. So we're still, though, in a sense of the grand sextile held in place with Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune all at like 1 and 2 degrees of the air and fire signs that they are in. So from that respect, it's still a powerhouse month, but it's not September when eclipse season begins. So it's going to be a little bit lighter. And there's not a whole lot coming this week, and I certainly have good news with Mercury going direct. So there's that will, make this week a little bit nicer. But let's start as we always do with a question. Chandler wrote in, and this is actually interesting. I have answered this question before because it's ultimately about intercepted charts. But no one has ever put forth the question asking about the double house rulership that has to happen if one set of signs doesn't rule any houses. So let's read the question, and then I'll get into the answer. Hi, Dr. Lennox and team. Thank you for your endless efforts to teach about astrology. I'll spare all the mushy gratitude. Why? don't spare.
Your favorite part.
No, this is actually I think by sparing it, she actually offered more. But just know it is there, and your work has helped me heal greatly, to say the least. Oh, golly, that's stunning. I never tire of hearing of that. I love how some of the questions at the top of the podcast episodes are usually oriented towards learning a deeper part of the structure of astrology and chart interpretation, almost like quick, bite-sized basics lessons. That's exactly why I do this.
Right.
Recently, I've come across a friend's chart that has Cancer repeated at the 2nd house, 3rd house, and Capricorn repeated at 8th house, 9th house. Both additionally repeat the degree points as well. Yes, of course, the chart's always symmetrical. I was sure that this was a mistake, but used several programs that all spit out the same result. This pattern caught my attention as I'd never seen it before on any chart I've come across. With a little bit of Googling, Google is great, kids. AI too, though AI hallucinates, be careful. With a little bit of Googling, I came across the concepts of duplicated and intercepted houses. I'm intrigued by this phenomena and its implications, and I don't have a direct question, more just wanted to hear your explanation of them or any service-level insights on the concept, energy, etc., especially when it comes to interpretation. Many thanks and blessings, Chan. So the reason Chandler hasn't come across this that often is that I would say only maybe 10 or 15% of charts are intercepted. So let's just talk about how it happens, right? So in the spin of the 24-hour day, you are taking your first breath somewhere on the planet, establishing a latitude and a longitude and a moment in time that you take that breath. In that spin of the day, wherever you land with that first breath will set up what's at the eastern horizon, and then Placidus House Systems has a bunch of calculations that figure out where all the other houses belong. In these little 10, 15-minute periods of the day, there will be a phenomena where if you take your first breath at that moment, one polarity in the chart will not rule any houses. They'll be stuck inside of a house. And we call that an interception. So 12 houses, 12 signs, normally an even distribution, but the intercepted chart, that person's taking their first breath at the exact right moment to create this squeezing. Now, in order for one sign and its opposite to not rule any of the 12 houses, that means that 2 houses in the chart have to be double ruled. If you look up interceptions, mostly you'll see language about the debilitating notion of them, that the held in abeyance energy diminishes or limits the native's access to that information. So if there's a planet in the intercepted space, the native won't have great access to that planet's consciousness. That's bullshit. That's not how it works at all. First of all, the big point of an interception is that it opens up at midlife, and whatever's held in abeyance has been like cookie dough that finally turns to cookies. And so you don't have no access to the planets or points. They just change from being sort of held and baked. Like, I have an intercepted sun in Venus. Do you think I didn't know who I was or have love in the first 40 years of my life? I did, but who I became at 40 was radically different from a wild spiritual explosion and the shifting of my life into what I do and what I am now. But there is this secondary artifact of the double house rulership. And that is also something that happens when a chart is intercepted. A person will have the same sign ruling 2 houses in a row. What's valuable about this is that the archetypal order of the zodiac has purpose and intelligence. The order counts. So that when you're thinking about like your 4th house of home and hearth, however you experience that sense of foundation directly will reflect how you experience joy and the dance of the 5th house, which then informs how you run your daily routine vis-a-vis the 6th house's consciousness, right? So that order counts, and when 2 houses that sort of feed into each other archetypally in a kind of understanding of the evolution of the human psyche, ruled by the same archetype, then there's a commonality and a through line for the native having access to a sort of, similitude. I'm using all the big words.
Yeah, really.
So, for example, Sagittarius rules my 12th house and is my rising sign. It rules my 1st house. That's one of the reasons why I am able to channel wisdom through me so effortlessly, because the sign that rules the ethers of the unconscious is the same sign as my showing up in the world. Right? In my 6th house and 7th house are both ruled by Gemini. That reflects the idea that my daily service and how I work with my body and health is mental and with affirmation and using my mind to guide my health, but also what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to an experience of a Gemini on my 7th house cusp. So one of the best ways to sort of look at this is to talk to the person that the chart is reflecting. A lot of times when people hear or learn things that are new to them astrologically, the first thing will be like, well, what does that mean for me? And it's like, well, you could tell me way more than I could tell you, right? Like,
Right.
You use the information and you filter it through your self-knowledge. So, like, Chandler can ask her friend, or if she knows her friend well, what she desires and wants and feels value to and how she communicates are both sort of Cancer styles within her experience. But there can be value to that, and you just have to figure what that value is out by looking at your life and how you relate to the 2 houses in question through the lens of what does it mean for me if both of these different areas of life prefer the same archetypal lens. So Wednesday's a big news day because Mars is changing signs. So the planet of our embodiment, our physical experience, decision-making, how we relate to anger, sex, how we do things, like how we approach jobs and projects, all the physical attributes of life in a body are represented by Mars. In fact, what I sort of like about where, Mars has been, and this speaks to the, elegance of the order of the signs and the order of the houses in the chart, that after spending so much time in Leo and retrograding back into Cancer to teach us more about, self-care, rest, and preparation, we then got to enjoy him moving through the healing sign of Virgo, where we got to integrate and put things back together again. I call Mars in Virgo the Humpty Dumpty passage, right? Where in great sense of putting everything in their proper place, we get to do that from a healing perspective as well. So on Wednesday, Mars moves into Libra, and, I gotta say, not so happy about that, given Mars is not comfortable in the sign of Libra. It's a sign known as his detriment. That's the Astro speak for it. And this happens right at a moment on the planet where the sort of bubbling, rageful potential is ripe, right? I'm talking about the political landscape and the wars in different places on the planet and everything that's sort of heating up. Now to have the planet that rules that physical response to things, and the planet that's natural ruler is the sign of war, is moving into territory where he feels so sort of held back by the environment he's in, he loses his shit. So Mars is like a person with, anger management issues. But as long as he's free to do his thing, it's never a problem. But then he moves into the to the sign of Libra, and all the maidens come up and say, "Shh, none of that. Relax. Find peace. What about the other person?" So in that mansion that's Venus ruled and a very sort of, it's actually not a feminine sign, so I can't say it's a feminine energy sign-wise, but it's certainly feminine from a perspective of the opposite of Mars. That's what causes a planet to be in what we call detriment. It has to be in the sign that's opposite its ruling sign. So Mars is ruled by Aries, therefore the opposite is Libra. It just so happens that Venus rules Taurus and Libra, so Mars is doubly angry because he's mad at his woman. I have Mars in Libra in my natal chart, and while my anger has never been thrown in your direction, Joe, it's been thrown to people because that's what it is to have Mars in Libra, where I am so peaceful and so forgiving and bring in such a sense of leadership, balance, harmony, and mediation, and that is who I am. Until I'm not. And when that comes, when the anger comes, which thank God, I can only be triggered by two things right now in my life. I'm not going to tell them here now because it's not about me, but I'm not in my 20s and 30s and even my early 40s anymore.
Yeah.
Where it was still specifically triggered, but I was triggered so often it might as well have just been random. So I'm sharing all of that with you because I know that some of you probably can't believe that I could get rageful in a way that would make you go, wow. But I'm a whole and complete human being, and I don't walk on water. But I share that personal experience with you guys because I think that as the world's been heating up and Mars has been in Virgo, that's sort of had our embodiment response to things coming from a place of integration. Like, how do we do this? What are we trying to figure it out? Look what's happening. None of that makes sense. But the Virgo energy would sort of be conducive to moving through those 6 weeks or so sort of responding to your body, your projects, your work, and your reactions to the outside world through the lens of I'm doing stuff, I'm putting stuff together, I'm doing something while the world is doing something. But as of Wednesday, that's going to change dramatically, and we're suddenly going to be in territory for 6 weeks where things that have been held and quiet will not be quiet, will explode. And I'm talking about in your personal life, in your community, and in the world at large. This is not a comfortable passage for Mars. And I think I can hear myself talking about it in the way that I am as much more dramatic this year than ever before. Like Mars moves around the zodiac every 2 years, so it's not like we haven't been here before, but we haven't been here before when the world itself is on like Tinder hooks and all of the outer planets are firing things up in this grand sextile. Like, so that's a setup for sudden, unexpected things to rise up out of nowhere, many of which could be very challenging and unexpected. And then Mars in Libra will have us all potentially holding on to our shit and then exploding. So watch that kind of a thing as you move through the next week or two and get used to this sensation. Check and see if you're feeling a little shorter in your temper and what happens when you bump up against, a conflict. You may be in for some of that, same reaction for the next 6 weeks. Now, the weekend ahead is going to give us a kind of insight into this placement as it relates to the setup with the outer planets, because Mars in the early degrees of Libra is going to hit all of the outer planets who are at early degrees of the signs that they are in. So on Friday, Mars will oppose Saturn and trine Uranus. That energy alone is potentially explosive, right? Mars activates, and an opposition to Saturn is very definitively a breakdown, a collision of some sort. For our personal lives, yes, it'll be something about your propelling motion gets sort of stopped, breaks on Friday. What can make it sudden and outrageous is the trine to Uranus. A trine just means flow. We used to think of trines as good versus, bad, but that's nonsense. Trines just mean that both energies are flowing very loudly, but in harmony with each other. So Mars trining Uranus basically says anything can happen and probably will wildly suddenly, and it ought to be connected to some major Saturnian lesson breakdown or slowdown. Next day on Saturday, the Mars moves just far enough to include Neptune in the opposition. And this shouldn't be thought of as separate from Friday's event, but we separate it with our sense of the calendar. You can think of these whole 3 days as just like Mars. And so it does peak that on Saturday, Mars is opposing Neptune, and that's like the sudden reveal. Anytime I might have said in my daily writings in the last year, more will be revealed, this is one of those more will be revealed, because Mars activates and Neptune has the cloud of fog that lifts and lowers based on things like this. And so a Mars opposition, to me, is going to be more likely to be revealing things unseen or previously hidden. And then Sunday's trine to Pluto brings in the depth of shadow and power struggles, right? I do clock the news. I'm blessed enough to be sort of in the world and not of it, in a way that I'm starting to think is coming from a neurodivergent perspective, because I've just always been that way, and I've never met anybody who could be quite so detached from the outside world, and I assure you I'm not a sociopath. So I do watch on the daily all the little moves of politics, because I find it fascinating. It's just a beautiful, wild unfolding, and everybody that I sit with privately, both students and clients, are in this world unfolding in a crazy way, and I have to be able to show up for them, so I pay attention to the news. So I'll just say this, given what's happening in the United States, this weekend's going to be fascinating with regard to what happens in governmental places where certain individuals are trying to keep hidden something that isn't hideable. And so this week into the weekend might reflect some interesting breakdowns of that little structure, out there in the United States political landscape. But also remember, every one of these transits is also reflecting things that are happening inside of each of us. So we're all going to have the experience this week of sort of facing life on life's terms, both your immediate outer life and the social, economic, political expression of life. And we're all going to have to find a way to be with the crazy unfolding. And that's sort of what I see as possible with this weekend's setup with Mars, that it's like introducing each of us in our embodiment into the next level of what it's going to be like to move through the world for the next 6.5 weeks. That's ready to blow up at any minute, and that we want to be mindful of how we're going to do that. And this weekend will give you a lot of data about how your body is going to respond to both the changes in your world and the world at large. The fact that there's a full moon in the middle of all of that is chef's kiss on the one hand, astrologically, but it's going to make this full moon this week very, very challenging. I'm inclined to take back what I said earlier about it being a sort of gentler month, because before we get to the full moon, I want to talk about the fact that Mercury on Friday, while all of this shit show is starting up with Mars, is going to be at his station. So on Friday of this week, he gets to 4 degrees of Leo. He will not move from 4 degrees of Leo until August 15th, next Friday. He'll turn around on Monday of next week. We'll be talking about that in next week's podcast. But the fact that while Mars is activating all of the outers and then Mercury stops moving, that puts our minds at a disadvantage and an advantage. Mercury not moving is at its most objective and focused capacity, but he's not moving and retrograde. So you could just consider that part of our sort of thinking and perceiving mind is going to be unavailable to us this weekend by virtue of the station's energy. And that will add a kind of odd sensation to, I think, allow Mars to be even more explosive as he interacts with the rest of the outer planets. The full moon at 16 degrees, 58 minutes of Aquarius will hit on Saturday, but just after midnight, 12:52 a.m. Pacific time. The Leo sun will be opposed by the Aquarius moon, and we move through the full moon where our conscious awareness is connected to us, ourself, our sense of who we are and what we offer in that Leonian, self-focused way. And then the Aquarius moon tells us, oh, hey, dude, I know you love all your gifts, like all that in a bag of chips, but if you're not offering that bag of chips to your community in service, you're not doing it right. Now, in some ways, this year hits different, just like everything else I've said, because of circumstances reflected by the outer planet's shift. And the Mars energy that I just described, I kind of described it in some great detail because it's part of the energy of this full moon. So just as the full moon says the unconscious is going to release sort of egoic material that keeps you from serving in a right-sized sort of way, Mars is sort of going to move us to new territory through what's called a kite formation. So let's start with the kite, because I kind of just described it to you when I told you what Mars is doing, because Mars is at the tail end of the kite. So what is a kite? A kite is a grand trine, so the 360-degree circle divided exactly into 3 equal parts. And then there has to be this other triangle on top of one of the sides of the triangle, making a sort of a low-rise triangle that results in a kite shape. And what do kites do? Kites fly. Now, why do kites fly? I mean, that's just cute. That's like sort of an astrological dad joke. But the reason kites fly is because any grand trine is like a vortex of spinning energy. Like we manifest through trines because they allow us to steward a lot of different energy all at the same time in the same volume or the same way. So they're very powerful. And of course, this is an air trine because it's formed by Uranus, fast and sudden change in Gemini, Pluto, shadow and deep, slow change and transformation, and then Mars at 1 degree of Libra creates the bottom of the kite, where whatever we're doing, choosing, acting, or intending to do and choose and act, and or release from the bodies, like if the body is Mars, the full moon is saying, let's let go of that backpack with all of those stones you've been carrying around so that you can serve better. This Mars trine sort of puts us right in the vortex of what fast change and slow change at the same time offers. Opposite Mars in Aries is where Neptune and Saturn are. They make the head of the kite. They are in Aries, the sign of war and a fire sign. It's also a cardinal sign. Libra starts things up. So Mars is in the cardinal sign of Libra, ready to have our bodies get moving, get started in something new. Aries is also a cardinal sign. It's the first cardinal sign of the zodiac. So Neptune and Saturn are also saying, get moving. Saturn says, be responsible for the fires that we're creating in the world because we got to navigate them, contain them, and hopefully put them out one day. And Neptune says it's a confusing and cloudy way. We won't always know what we're doing, but we want to make sure that we have our inspiration with us, our divine inspirations, our creative inspirations. We can't leave that out. Okay, so that pattern and setup is like the artifact of the release of this full moon. Meaning I'm going to separate out the idea that I'm now going to talk about the sun and the moon opening up the unconscious to let something go. The Mars kite tells me that, I'm not setting this up to be competitive with what I'm saying. It's just to the extent to which you're able to release hindering things in your psyche now, the more you'll be able to take advantage of Mars and the kite and move in new directions. So one of the things I love about the setup of where the moon and the sun are is that at 17 degrees of Aquarius, the full moon is in conjuncting the south node. The south node is where we hold the past. And all of the shit that we want to let go of from the unconscious is also sort of held by the south node because a lot of the stuff we have to release is about past patterns and habits and events that might have, shook us up that we haven't let go of or processed, right? So the full moon is going to dig right into the place where our past is held and say, get rid of some of that consciousness. It's not serving you. Venus and Jupiter are meeting up in Cancer, where Jupiter is exalted. So there's sort of on the side of this full moon is this sense of our hearts being very full with the idea of like, what's feeding me? Cancer is about nurturing and sustenance and care. Jupiter, the planet of all abundance, prosperity, expansion, and manifestation, exalted in this sign, says the world is your oyster. You may have anything you desire as long as, and so my language there is always that you feel deserving of it, that it comes from your heart, that you have the talent to sort of, do the thing that you desire. And so Venus and Jupiter in a conjunction in Cancer sort of has on the side of this full moon the power of manifestation, the power of things that live in your heart as strong desires can be the very fertilization that takes your desires into the future. Now, we're not in a new moon, we're in a full moon. But the reason why I'm bringing up Venus and Jupiter isn't just because of them, but because of their trine to Black Moon Lilith. So our shadow mascot, the point that represents where we are repressing our unconscious, where we are avoiding our sexuality, where we are saying, oh no, I can't go there. Black Moon says, sorry, I'm going to trip you up on the sidewalk because you can't avoid that shadow work. And so when you have Venus and Jupiter in a trine with Black Moon Lilith, then there's an ease, but the ease and flow is into the areas below where shadow fears live. And there's a great opportunity for that kind of an unconscious release, but it might require you to courageously go to a very vulnerable place. Venus in Cancer is the most personally tender sign for Venus to be in with regard to our emotional body. And then that in Jupiter trining the point that says you cannot avoid looking at things that are below the surface. That's going to color how these couple of days of this full moon go and what the lunar cycle as a whole will bring us. I mentioned that Mercury is stationing at 4 degrees. He's doing this in a loose opposition to Pluto. Now, he won't actually hit the opposition directly, right? Because he's going to turn around at 4 degrees and then move forward. But that non-moving mind that's in the mansion of our centered expansiveness, Leo, is also aware of the deep changes, not only that have to take place, but that are taking place. Mercury opposing Pluto. Now, the more I talk about this, it all sounds way worse than my optimism at the top of the episode.
Yeah.
Listen, the geometry in this full moon is, I'm going to say air quotes, good geometry, lots of trines and sextiles. So trines mean a sort of unavoidable flowing energy, and so change and bumpiness and radical moments are absolutely going to be part of this full moon and the lunar cycle. Back to the idea that trines we used to think of as good, but now it really just means that both the hot and the cold water is turned on full blast. Now, the resulting water is warm and yummy, but at the edges of the sink, it's cold and burning. So those trines mean business, both for the planet at large and for us. So if there's anything to sort of, pray for in this lunation, I want to remind you back of the basic principles. Leo's sun says, I know who I am, I know my gifts, and I willingly share them with the world with courage and creative mastery. Aquarius says it's got to serve the community. For some people, it's going to be about letting go of egoic responses to who you are and softening that ego so that you can serve more directly. And for some of y'all, it's going to be about stepping the fuck up and finding your courage despite your past patterns of inhibition and offer your creative gifts to the world, because we need everybody to be doing this to the highest level so that we can make it through this very difficult time and usher in the possibility of peace for humanity. But it starts with each of us on our individual paths. Have fun in this full moon, but just allow things to be released from a very deep place. If there's a lot of tears, I won't be surprised by that. But it's all in service of reforming us so that we can step up and help at a time when it's needed so badly. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily Astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily Astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
We have an email and dream from Nikki. Nikki writes, "Hi, Michael and Zoe. I love your podcast and listen to it each week. I've always been interested in dreams and often am able to decipher the symbolism in my own through drawing them or talking it.
Ooh, love that. Ooh.
Yeah, or talking it over
Best.
with a friend who also likes dreams. This one
Second
is a bit tougher for me, though, and I'd love your perspective. I was driving in a new town, presumably on vacation, but I was by myself, which is weird because in real life, I'm married with 3 kids. I was looking for a parking lot, but drove into a kind of compound that I recognize as an oil refinery and promptly turned around to get out of there fast, aware that I wasn't supposed to be there. As I continued to look for a parking spot in this town that I didn't know, I noticed that the oil refinery was built up all along the water's edge, and the town was very industrial looking, with lots of concrete. I decided that I would go down to the bottom of the water to take a sample of the bottom to see if the refinery was impacting the environment. In the dream, I knew for sure that it was. I just needed the sample to prove it. The oil refinery had large machines in the water that looked like large mechanical insects. I could only see the top of them, and the windows facing forward looked like eyes. But they were tinted dark, and I couldn't see into them. I was trying to stand on top of one of the machines and ride it down to the bottom of the water. But I could only go down a little bit, and then I would float upwards, or not be able to breathe, or hang on, and I would have to come up to the surface again. I tried over and over, but realized my human limitations. I also, interestingly, didn't have any tools with me to take a sample with. That was the end of the dream. Since it was so vivid and specific, I asked my unconscious for more information about this dream.
Good.
The following night, I dreamt this. I thought it was so interesting. She asked her subconscious, her unconscious,
Yep.
and it
Yep.
came. Okay, so this is the next night's dream. I was in a swimming race. The race was on the surface of a pool, and I recognized some of the other racers as work colleagues of mine. They were pissed that they had to be in the race. I was too. But then I realized, or was told, that it wasn't a race that had a winner. The only thing we had to do to be in the race was to put on the numbered penny. I happily told the grumpiest coworker, the only thing you have to do is put this on and move your arms. She didn't look convinced, but I sensed some relief. Thank you for any insight. Nicola.
One of the things that was interesting, I didn't, of course, know that there was a secondary petitioned
Right.
dream. But while I was listening to you describe the first dream, one of the thoughts was, like, she even used this word, human limitations. And I was already having this sort of vibe of she wants to write it all the way down, but I don't think it's for her.
Wait, what do you mean?
Like, I don't think humans are supposed to be that
yes.
deep in her symbolic water, because when
Right.
she petitioned the dream to get more information, she's still in water, but only on the surface. So there's the absence of that desire to get down to the bottom. Even that is interesting because she doesn't even have the thing that she would need to take the sample, right? So everything in that first dream is on some level pointing to that's not for you. That impulse isn't right. Whatever that impulse would be, to get to the bottom of whatever. We'll see where we go when we go a little deeper into the dream. But that was interesting just in the way I received it. New town by myself has got something to do, I think, with Nikki's identity having to sort of shift a little bit because of the new town, the new world, everything that's happening. Whether she's writing about being connected to current events or just in her own little world, as a result of a planet on fire, all of us are like living in a new town. We all have to figure out who we are in relation to something new. And so the fact that her kids and her hubby aren't there, to me, just means it's a dream about her personal experience inside her skin.
Yes.
And what she's looking for is to stop. She wants a break. Stop the world. I want to get off. I'm looking for a parking lot. She never finds one, remember? She gets to the compound where the juice of the dream is, but it's really important that several times she mentioned, I'm looking for a parking spot, I'm looking for a parking spot. Parking spots symbolically mean that the forward movement of your life is paused while then the dream is expressing what's available in that pause, that the dream says, don't move forward, stop, have a transformation, if you will. Now, even the oil refinery as a place, to me, suggests old ways, new ways, right? Oil is old. Fossil fuels is old. And what's the concern legitimately in waking life is the environmental impact. So then I see that part of the oil refinery consciousness is, to me, describing like institutions and governments and the world, which is no longer feeling like a fertile, verdant, organic, lovely place to be. It's feeling industrial, impactful, where, just to sort of fuel ourselves, we are poisoned. So I do think that that's what that refinery and the concrete atmosphere represents, something of life as about the, chopping wood, carrying water, got to get it done, got to make sure that I've got oil to keep the house. So then we have the water. Water is not only our emotional nature, it's like antithetical to concrete and industrial sort of perspectives, that in that environment, in the scene of the oil refinery next to the water would be the part of the expression that is creative and feminine, right? Where the concrete in the building is the masculine. So if that scene is like a snapshot of life and existence itself, the water in that scene is where Nikki wants to go so she can connect back to the fluid, the feminine, the creative. But the water sucks. It's poisonous, and she wants to fix it. She wants to fix the poison from the refinery that's the net result of a century or more of polluting consciousness itself. But that's not for her. It's not for a human being to go to the bottom of where the emotional disconnect is and like fix it. Grand effort, but not only can't you get down there, Nikki, you don't even have the cup you need to take the sample. Like, it's not a solution. The first part of the dream doesn't offer a solution. And Nikki was, in fact, a little baffled by the dream itself, because even to me, the dream doesn't offer a solution. It simply presents the limitation. That is not for you or for human beings to get to the bottom of the emotional drudgery. That's not even a word. That's out there. But the consciously aware person, the critical thinker, the one who has done some examining, that person will know to look deeper. Right, so even the petitioning of the dream is like a living dream, sort of symbol of the idea that when we are stuck with trying to fix the old that is unfixable, the only way to get to the next layer of what's really underneath that would be to consciously ask for it. Right, so it's not a dream, it's in between dreams, but I want to say this out loud to sort of inspire everybody who's listening, that's how we get it. That's how we do a deeper, job of being who we are and meeting life with more, courage and fortitude and capacity, because we become like more us every day. And how we do that is we think about what's below the surface. And by the way, this is a tool of dream interpretation. I call it petitioning your dreams. You can do this in any way. What Nikki did was she asked for more information about the dream itself. You can be in a situation where you're ambivalent about something and ask your dreams to give you information. Years ago, I was dating a guy, and I petitioned the dream because I was ambivalent about it. He was a little bit annoying, but there was something there. And I said, hey, dreams, tell me. I won't tell the whole dream, but it was an anniversary party for me and my partner who was acting badly. And when he came into the room, it was my father.
Girl.
So, needless to say, I broke up with that man the next day.
Oh my gosh, may we all have
yes, it's a fabulous story.
Have that amount of clarity from our dreams.
And that's the thing, is that clarity comes from asking, of not just moving through life where you say, here we are in the oil refinery place. It sucks. It's concrete, and I got to fix it.
You know what's interesting? I think there's a lot of these, there have been a lot of more dreams with industrial symbolism and water. We had one, what was it, a month or two ago, and it was similar. There was like water, rust, industrial vibes.
Yeah, I can say in a general way, I think those dreams are reflecting deep emotional impact at facing the old structures, recognizing them for being devoid of human sort of, I've lost the word, human yumminess.
Humanity.
Anyway, back to Nikki and her dream, because she did this thing. She asked for more. And then this whole swimming race thing, to me, kind of landed like life itself as a race. We're in air-ish because we're on top of the water, so half of us is in air, but we're in an emotional experience. In other words, the race of life, where we're all individuals, and my number is not your number, like we all have to be our individual selves sort of swimming the same race, where there's going to be emotional content that now and then we're going to be in, and we're going to have to remember to lift our heads and breathe, right? And the colleagues being what's present is also interesting to me, that this petition dream section is about like Nikki's life outside of the house. Otherwise, might she have been in the water with her family? So, because it's not about who Nikki's being in her intimate life and with her family, it's about how Nikki's relating to the outside world. where we're all in a race as individuals. Some of us don't want to do it. We're pissed at the obligation of it. But it's not about winning. It's about collectively moving in the same direction. And one of the things at the very end of this dream reflected, service. She goes up to the person who has less consciousness about what's happening, and she serves.
Yeah.
She says, put this on, move your arms. That, to me, is the chef's kiss of the end of the dream, which is we're all in the same race. I got to swim and not be bothered by other people who don't want to be there, and I have to find places to be of service, and then we all win the race.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.